Taking home a souvenir. Here's your look at the Weta Workshop Mini Epics Aliens Facehugger. "40 years ago, director Ridley Scott's masterpiece of science fiction Alien burst onto the big screen, spawning one of the most iconic film franchises of all time. To celebrate the 40th anniversary of Alien, Weta is thrilled to present the terrifying Facehugger into Mini Epics Mix. This highly stylized figure stands around 6 inches tall and should be displayed safely away from, well, faces. Before we get things underway, how about we do a size comparison? Having already looked at a Weta Workshop Mini Epics Alien figure, we can slide over the questionable titled character of Facehugger and bring in the not-so-questionable Ellen Ripley we looked at earlier. Everything around there we go. They're going to be about the same size to one another. They're going to be about the same proportions, and sadly, they're also going to be about the same price point. Something I sometimes delicately tiptoe in to these reviews. But the price point for the Mini Epics, once again, are sitting around that $41 to $42 price point. I think for both the figures, the Facehugger and the Ellen Ripley, they were about $41.99 at my local comic book store. So they're a little bit more expensive than the, quote, pop culture collectibles that you tend to find there. Like with Ellen Ripley, the Facehugger comes included with a clear acrylic display stand. But it's not the same display stand that we get included with Ellen Ripley. So you think that you can get one stand and just mix and match it and use for other characters. No. You can't do it here. Let me show you exactly what I mean by that. This is the one that comes included with the Facehugger. This is the one that comes included with Ellen Ripley. While they're clear, yes, the same size, sure, the placement of the pegs are actually in different spots. The Facehugger is kind of more the centered area of the clear stand, while Ellen Ripley's clearly is a little bit more off to the far side. So you again can't use this one for the Facehugger, and you certainly can't use this one for Ellen Ripley, so make sure you kind of hold on to these. Still, though, I would debate the idea of even wanting to even use the display stands when displaying the figures, because moving this one back into the middle of the frame here, that's about right. You can clearly see that the Facehugger, granted, yes, the Facehugger is being held back by a cane, so it's not really technically even just a Facehugger. But still, the figure stands fine on its own. It doesn't necessarily need blocking now in front of it. It doesn't need one of these. The only way, again, to validate, I feel, using a display stand that's already bigger than the character that's standing on top of it, is maybe if they had printed the name of the franchise. So I'm just using this as a scenario. If they had printed, say, Alien, next to it, they had put Facehugger, or King, and then they had put, say, a number to tell you what number this is out of their series, then yes. Because now you're automatically identifying these stands to that character, and it makes it look more like a statued setup on your display, then yeah, I would probably say you can use a display stand. But I still feel like the display stand on Kane, I can just call him Kane, should be a little bit smaller. I mean, it should be really about that size. It doesn't have to be using so much plastic to do the job. Let's move that to the side. Without certainly talking too much about the name that they've chosen for this character, I mean, clearly they've called it the Facehugger. And I guess it's the same similar circumstance of calling just a release on its own Jones, even though I would have loved to get just Jones on his own. They had to put the Facehugger with something. Now, really, they could have also just released, going back to that display stand, I'm sorry again, blocking everything. They could have actually just put a bunch of eggs out and a couple of Facehuggers sticking out and called the release Facehugger. But instead of what they've ended up doing here was they've actually taken a full-out character. And again, I'm assuming this to be Kane and not just some random person that's down on the planet. Because, of course, we know Kane encounters the Facehugger and then abruptly has to eject it out from his body when he's eating lunch of all things. That would probably turn me off, I feel. If I'm sitting down to have a meal with some guy that's going to have some alien coming out of his chest, shocked I may be that the alien's coming out of his chest, but turned also off I would be for whatever meal I'm eating. I'm hoping it's not like spaghetti and meatballs or anything like that. But anyways, though, getting aside from the topic of food and eating things, speaking of not quite eating things, but this Facehugger clearly, though, wants to mow down on this guy's face. Again, the idea that this is really the name of the character right here, it's Facehugger, And yet for the mix of things, we've brought in a whole entire character to convey the idea of what the Facehugger is capable of doing. One thing I do like, though, is the anguish and the sheer fright on the face of, I'm again going to guess that's Kane on the inside. They have slightly tinted the dome in such a way that you can still see the face, but it's slightly distorted. I think that works really, really well for the sculpting of this character. Now, of course, the main sell of this being the Facehugger itself. We'll do our best to kind of spin this around. You can kind of see that Facehugger is ready to get things going. The detail work, though a little harder to kind of make out on the interior of the Facehugger, is rather sculpted nicely. These individual skinny fingernails, fingers and long fingernails, again, nicely painted as well. I do like that they've added a clear finish to this, where it does make it look slimy and wet. They could have even gone the better and just added a few little drips of slime, sculpted maybe from the end of the tail, as this poor fellow is trying to hold back this Facehugger that's smashing through the front of his dome. The coloring on this is quite good. Most of the brighter colors are sort of centric around the Facehugger, but it's not to say that there's not a lot of color happening here for the rest of the figure's body. Still kept to those Nostromo colors of the creamy beige color, the off yellow mustard color, and the little whited areas of the padding on the lower of the legs. It has still that sort of familiar proportions that we've used to now seeing with the mini epics that Weta Workshop are producing. I really like this pose, first of all. The pose works really, really well. And actually, just again for comparisons, and we already brought her in, but we'll just slide over. The Facehugger will bring in Ellen Ripley. I find, if anything, even if I somewhat question the face sculpts, because again, Ellen Ripley I don't think was as good as it could have been. Maybe it was just the cheekbones. Maybe she had to be more defined in the cheekbone area. But still, though, I like the proportions and I like the poses that they put these characters in. I mean, that's a really good heroic pose for Ellen Ripley. And equally so on the other end of the spectrum, I think that's a really nice pose, though, also for the Facehugger, even though technically it's not just the Facehugger. I know we're going to keep talking about that. Picking it up again so you can see again some of the detail work. They have even actually gone in there in oxidized blue, the front plating as well as the shoulders of the armor. Not quite even the armor, the spacesuit that he's wearing. All the colors that would be familiar there on the suit are also represented here on the back as well, with the tank and the little canisters there as well, little valves on the back there as well. And even like little buttons and switches are all colored in there nicely. I like this color that they've also chosen too. It's not quite copper. It's not quite brown. It's something that's lingering in between as I slither my hand straight through the screen here. I've also liked that they also gone in there and they've darkened up these areas, whether they've just gone in with a dry brush and painted in to fill in those creviced areas. But it does add a little bit of extra nice depth to it. Again, it's a really nice looking pose on the character. Could this have succeeded, I feel, with this Facehugger just being on its own? Yes. They could have, again, just released this really as just a bunch of eggs. They could have stylized the eggs, made them a little bit longer, made them a little bit more bulbous down at the bottom. And then they could have had a couple of Facehuggers coming out. But then again, I guess you'd have to call the packaging Facehuggers plural, as opposed to just one regular Facehugger. Still, I feel debatable as to what they should have really called this character. At the end of the day, it really is Kane. It's not a Facehugger. But I like the way that they've still incorporated the idea of having a Facehugger trying to latch onto his face. Not only does the pose really work on the character, but the sculpt is my favorite of the two that we've looked at so far. Once again, I draw your attention to the back of the packaging while the Facehugger does a little thing on the spinning rotisserie. Noticed on the back, I'm sure you'll see, number 1 is the Xenomorph, number 3 is the Facehugger. It's not really its name. And then somewhere in the middle, there's a gap. And one would probably assume that number 2 is the Ellen Ripley. No, that's not right. I didn't want to draw everyone's attention to the fact that that was wrong, but it's wrong. Ellen Ripley is number 4, so that gap between 1 and 3, somebody is yelling number 2. Very good. It is number 2, right in the middle. I think is actually an exclusive Xenomorph. It has eluded me, just the same as number 1 Xenomorph has eluded me. The comic book store, when I went in to pick these up, didn't have the Xenomorph. I guess the person that was going in just had set in their mind, they looked to the back shelf where all of these were located and said, I just want the Xenomorph. And left behind both Ellen Ripley and Facehugger for me then to pick up, but then that meant I couldn't pick up the Xenomorph. So I've now reached out, asked the comic book store, could you please order in the Xenomorph if it's still available, because I definitely don't want to have to order one of these online. That price point, mentioned already again, I'll say it again in this final looks, $41.99, $42, give or take, for these collectibles. That could probably almost double, I would expect, if I'm going to be ordering this online, factoring in the shipping cost, the brokerage fees. I'm not going to bore you with all of that, but it's all the delightful things that a Canadian collector can expect when ordering things online. So I'm going to still continue to check with my local comic book store because yes, I do want to add the Xenomorph to my collection along with the Facehugger, along with the Ellen Ripley, and of course all the other Ghostbuster epic minis, mini epics. Do I keep calling them epic minis? Mini epics that we've also looked at previously here on this channel. You know, I'm going to go off on a side tangent. Everybody don't mind? Don't mind if I go on? Okay, thank you. This style of design, I don't know what licensing they have at their disposal, but could you imagine the poses that they put these characters in and that kind of super deformed styling? Imagine if they could do this with like horror characters. I'm talking Jason Voorhees, a Freddy Krueger, Pinhead, Leatherface, Michael Myers. Sure, why not? Again, I don't know, and I can't make the assumption that Mini Epics or Weta Workshop behind the scenes could look into getting franchises like that. But I definitely think there's potential on the board. I already like the way that these come across on a shelf. They're very unique than your traditional collectibles that you can find at comic book stores. If they could only branch off, they've already done Alien and they've already done Predator. If they could branch off to doing the horror stuff as well, I think there's a huge potential for the Mini Epics from Weta Workshop to be like the collectible to pick up for horror fans out there. That's a lot of pressure I've just put on the shoulders of Weta Workshop, but if it's something that they're capable of doing, please make the horror icons as the Mini Epics as well. With that being said, what do you guys think of the Mini Epics Weta Workshop characters of the Facehugger? And again, even though it's not really the Facehugger, there's a lot more going on than just simply the Facehugger alone. It is definitely one of my favorites. If not, it is my favorite of the two, both the Ellen Ripley and the Facehugger. I prefer this one a little bit more than the Ellen Ripley because it's got a lot more, I don't know, a lot more energy behind the pose on this one. But if you have picked up any of the Mini Epics, but feel free, let me know down below in the comments section. First of all, which ones you did pick up. And second of all, what you guys think of these, if you haven't picked them up, but just based on these reviews. If you have enjoyed this video, would you throw a like if you don't mind, if you'd be so kind. And if you're also new to this channel, somehow wandered in from the far reaches of space, I'm going to have to first check that stomach of yours before we sit down to eat. Not spaghetti and meatballs today, no way. But if you have straggled in from space, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, turn the bell notification on, and make sure that, yes, you're coming back to this channel with your astral peepers peeled, because we may look at more Mini Epics in the not-so-distant future. And as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.